Koka sunarai sunarayanti. 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 Koka sunarai sunarayanti.
Hello, hi. Welcome to this new episode of the Mango TV podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have Richard Grossman. In part caused by an early childhood trauma, Dr. Richard Grossman has been dedicated to healing since an early age. His spiritual search also started early. By age 15, he had concluded that his only reason to be alive was to help others out of their suffering. Nice. To aid this goal, he became a doctor of Oriental medicine in 1983. During this time, he was introduced to the world of plant medicine, especially ayahuasca. Now, his work is a unique combination of traditional Amazonian shamanism, deep energetic healing, and sound healing. His soon to be published book, The Medicine of Your Life, explores this journey in depth. He's also exploring the healing power of visual image with the use of AI. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you.
So, we like to explore very far out topic in our podcast, but we keep a very, traditional and conservative structure. We still like to do present, past, future. So let's start, I'm very interested in what happened when you were 15, but where did you grow up? Let's go through the biographical aspect, if you don't mind.
Okay, so I was born in upstate New York to parents that were second generation immigrants from Eastern Europe. My grandparents came over at the turn of the last century and set up shop, and then around the middle of the last century, the whole family immigrated out to Los Angeles and set up their lives here. So I grew up in a beautiful family environment, very traditional, lots of holidays and lots of food and all of that stuff happened. And my father was a pharmacist, and because they were struggling, they couldn't afford babysitter for me, and I was not the kind of kid that could be cooped up in the house even with a babysitter. So I went to the every summer vacation, I'd go to the pharmacy every day and help. I'd stamp envelopes, I'd seal the envelopes. I'd sometimes even get to push the buttons on the cash register, which was really the highlight of my whole week. And but I got interested. There was one shelf that he had in his pharmacy, one section that was all plants. And I don't remember what he had there. I remember Coca-Cola syrup when Coca-Cola was still a medicine, and it had cocaine in it probably at that time. I don't know if it did, but I don't know. But it was still a medicine for stomach problems, and he had different plants in jars, and that really fascinated me. So that went from being the son of a pharmacist, to kind of when I was pretty young, I went through a crisis with one of my relatives dying. And a beloved uncle, this is all in my book in detail, but a beloved uncle died, and I locked myself up in my bedroom and wouldn't come out for 3 days. I was so like, what is this death thing? What is this? How could somebody who was so much love and so much loved suddenly be no longer on this planet? And I went through the whole existential crisis at about 8 or 9 years old
Wow.
of what's my life about? What am I living for? Who am I? I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Everything that I do, no matter what I do, it's going to be gone. If I make tons of money, it'll be gone. If I have a big, huge house in Beverly Hills, it'll be gone. And everything's going to be gone. And then I thought to myself, like, what would be meaningful? And the only thing I could find that would be meaningful would be to help other people, to help other people out of their suffering. And this could have been because I grew up in a medical environment, but it was also part of my soul that just really was interested in how can I participate in helping others. So that journey kind of started young and really developed when I started hitting my early teens, when I picked up a book in a used bookstore called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, and I was suddenly introduced to Zen and what that meant and meditation. And, went from there to Autobiography of a Yogi to Krishnamurti to, I don't even remember all the books. I'll Be Here Now, of course, to all of the books I read back then. And it was like more and more just recognizing that the path that was my family's path wasn't my path. To go to college, be a doctor, get a degree, you know, nuclear family, all of that stuff. And I did start getting into some plant medicines in my late teens, mid teens. And the first time I did it, I was like, this makes so much sense to me. This makes so much sense that I can eat a plant and it can teach me. I can eat a plant.
That was
No,
ayahuasca?
that was mushrooms back then.
Mushroom, yeah.
Mushrooms and
Yeah.
peyote. That was the only things that were available. Marijuana, but I didn't really ever like marijuana very much. Uh, so that was a biggie. I ended up, taking a interesting, I wouldn't call it a side trip because it was really important, but an interesting detour away from healing into a deep, deep practice of meditation, contemplation, understanding, knowledge. And that lasted for mid 20s. The healing thing came up again. And I think right about then, I got a degree in massage therapy and started working on people's bodies. And I didn't really like that very much. But then something happened. I don't remember what it was. And acupuncture popped into the world. And there was a school that had recently opened up that a friend of mine was a teacher at. And I just signed up one night, one day. I was like, I'm going to do this. And became an acupuncturist, went into private practice. And
Do you mind if I ask you just to elaborate a little bit on your first mushroom trip? It was with friends. Do you remember how much? It was a big
it
dose,
wasn't a big
medium dose?
dose. It was a medium dose. I would say probably nobody measured things. You just
Yeah.
ate
4 or
mushrooms.
5 gram,
Probably like three,
3.
4. My
And
body's
and
very
and
sensitive to medicine. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And you said that you realized that those plants teach you things. Do you remember what was the
Yeah. It
teachings?
was funny because I was actually, I was in high school. I was at a party when it happened. And it was a party that was in a beautiful Santa Monica mountain house. And in the backyard, there was this oak tree. And I walked up to the oak tree and looked at the oak tree. And, the bark was doing the moving thing and morphing into figures and faces. And I'm just looking at this in awe of how beautiful something that I had, because I grew up in these mountains, I'd seen 100,000 times, or a million times, I don't know, but I'd never really seen it before. And I realized, in that moment that I was seeing something that was always there, that oak tree was a being that I never saw as a being before. That oak tree was a consciousness that I never saw before. And that oak tree could take me places that I never went before with the mushrooms. But, even after the mushrooms, I can still look at an oak tree and have the same connection to it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's what happened
Yeah.
with that. And peyote I did once. Same thing happened. Some friends of mine went out to go camping up in the mountains above Santa Barbara, where there was a beautiful lake for swimming in, and they all went. We ate the peyote, which was very difficult for me because it just was really intense flavor. But I ate a few buttons and then just sat down and I just sat watching. It was a beautiful location, watching the trees breathing in the wind and watching the river sparkling and just the utter absolute beauty of nature was mind-boggling to me, just mind-boggling, and that changed my life. I recognized also that what I was seeing that was so mind-boggling was also inside of me, that the outside and the inside, Kabir said it in one of his poems, "The inner and the outer have become as one sky." And that was what I was experiencing, was the beauty that I was seeing outside was actually the beauty of my own soul that was being reflected on the outside. And the beauty of the outside was being reflected on my inside. And did I need plants to do that? I think I did at that point. I think they really accelerated my growth in a big way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd love to go back a little bit later on the ontology of this dissolving of this barrier between us and the ecosystem, and this perception of one organism. But just to finish on your a little bit on your childhood. So now you are in doing acupuncture,
Right. And
and so
so to go back, I was pretty messed up also. Even though I was doing Tai Chi and getting acupuncture and meditating, I was very, like, a lot of pain inside of me from the unresolved trauma of childhood, a lot of pain. And so a friend of mine that I'd known since I was like 18 was a chiropractor, and he also then became a plant medicine healer, and not just plants, but other substances, MDMA, things like that. And before it was illegal. And I started working with him, doing a number of different things. And each time it was amazing. Just like I never went into a fear state. I never went into a, it's too much, make it stop state. It was just beautiful. And, feeling those locked places inside of me just going open.
do you mind if I'm asking where were the lock coming from?
When I was 4 to 5 years old, I don't remember exactly when, my right index finger got amputated in a bicycle accident,
Well,
and that was intense. That was intense, and that locked up a lot of pain and fear and suffering, and the trauma didn't end with the accident; continued for years of being the freak in school and that kind of stuff.
yeah, Gabor Mate says that the trauma is not the event. The trauma is your reaction to the
Yes, of
event.
course.
And so I can see how you felt, not being part of the community, and feel, this at that age felt different, and you internalize this sense of not being accepted, and yeah, and then with MDMA you were able to maybe access this memory without the pain,
Yeah.
and so in certain way you were able to metabolize and
I
integrate.
couldn't even touch the memory for years after that. It was so powerful and so deep and so, like triggering, re-triggering. Um, but then one day after I was recently graduated from being an acupuncturist, he called me up and said, I brought some ayahuasca up from South America. You've got to try this. And I had no idea what it was. Nobody knew what it was back then. Maybe there was a little bit in Ginsberg's book, and Terence McKenna was already starting to get his popularity going, but I never had heard of it before. And of course, I said, of course, right away. Let's do it next week. Come on. And
Which year was that, más o menos,
más o
more or less?
menos, más o menos, 1984, pienso, I think.
80, okay.
1984. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 40 years ago.
yeah, yeah. And because it was just after I graduated in 83. Yeah, so I suddenly feel very old again.
No, but the spirit is young. I can
Spirit is
feel it.
very young.
Yeah.
Spirit hasn't grown up yet. So anyway, so I went to his house. He had a beautiful house he was living at in the Malibu Mountains, and drank this medicine. And he was definitely in the beginning stages of his work with ayahuasca. I don't think he really trained. He didn't know any Icaros, didn't know much, but he had these great sound system, these 6 foot tall speakers, and laid me down on a mat in the middle of the room and started playing this music. And I was lying there and suddenly, the music is changing and I'm changing and everything is changing. And I went into this experience that still rocks my world, where like 1 second I was lying down on the mat, and I've had a lot of ayahuasca experiences since then. Nothing's been like this. And when I tell it, people get scared, but it's not that scary. So I was lying on the mat, and from 1 second to the other, I was in Malibu mountains on the mat, and then the next second, I was in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany.
Wow.
And 3D, fully real, um, like everything except the sense of smell was there. I could hear it,
Wow.
I could see it, I could feel it, I could feel the temperature. It was like not winter, but it was cold and raining. And it was horrifying because I could see people being taken, going into the gas chambers. I could see the suffering. I could feel the suffering. And I could not switch channels. It was like, and it was like, make it go away. No, keep it here. No, make it go away. Make it stop. No, I like this. I want to see this. What's here? Back and forth for a few minutes. And then finally I was there, and I kind of put out like, what to the universe, to God, what am I supposed to be doing with this? Why am I seeing this? And if you ever get to work with me, you'll realize I say don't listen to the voices in the head. But this one I listened to, it said trust and forgive. And then
Do you have an ancestor that was in the your grandfather was in Germany at the
no,
time?
they all my whole well, my immediate family all left around 1900, which was way
Hmm.
before Nazi Germany. But I'm sure some relatives that I never met, never knew of were there. But it's ancestral,
Hmm.
it's in the field anyway. But so anyway, let me finish the story here because it's a good
Yes,
one. And
of course.
so trust and forgive. And then I went into a whole dialogue of like, what am I supposed to trust? Trust and forgive. What am I supposed to forgive? Trust and forgive. What do I do with this? Trust and forgive. Am I supposed to forgive Hitler? Trust and forgive. Am I supposed to forgive the Nazis? Trust and forgive. Nothing came to me but trust and forgive, trust and forgive, trust and forgive. And then I finally asked, what does trust and forgive mean? And the answer that came in was, it means letting go of your inner connection to all of this trauma. It means
Mm.
releasing it and allowing the winds of time to blow it to where it exists, which is non existence. It no longer exists. It's only here. It no longer, or here, or wherever in my body, it no longer exists. It's gone. Time has taken it away. Why do you, why are you continuing to bring it into the present? And when I like, okay, I'm going to let this go. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let go of all the anger, all of the trauma, all of the pain. And it was gone. Then I was someplace else. And they got increasingly unpleasant, someplace else, someplace else, someplace else, someplace else, someplace else, someplace else, going all the way back in time to the beginning. And when it was over, I was a little butterfly outside the window flying around through the flowers. And it was so
Wow.
beautiful. And it was so hard and so beautiful. And as soon as I was that little butterfly, I thought to myself, this is my work. This is it. This is the most powerful healing modality that I could possibly imagine. And I didn't start doing it for many years after that. I still had to work on all those remnants of the trauma and of the fear and of whatever else it was inside of myself until that was healed up. And there's probably still some there. It still comes up from time to time, but 99.9 is better. And that was kind of my path into working with ayahuasca.
Wow. It's such a mysterious substance, right? Because so many people don't feel anything the first time,
Yeah,
or very little.
yeah.
And you went to this incredible regression and
I'm not going to even call it a regression. Okay, so Fast forward to about 4 years or 5 years ago, I was in Poland doing some work there, and I was with a friend of mine, and we were driving. I forget the names, Warsaw to Warsaw. I don't know. A lot of
You
this.
were doing medicine work.
Yeah, I was working
Yeah.
there, and we were going to pass Auschwitz, and we see the sign Auschwitz 10 kilometers or whatever it was. And I'm like, should we go? No, too intense. We're in 2 nights of a place. Should we go? Oh, maybe. But it's cold and it's raining and it looks like a horrible day. And we got to the off ramp and I watched your hands just go and take the off ramp. And we got stuck in traffic because they were redoing the road in the city, so it took us like 2 hours on traffic congestion to get to actual Auschwitz. So it was already late afternoon. So we spent a couple hours walking around, and it was intense. But the next day we went to the other concentration camp, and that's one with the train tracks leading to the building. And we walked in the front door, and I'm looking around, and like this was where I was in that ayahuasca trip.
You
I
recognize it.
recognized it completely. No doubt at all that that was where I was. So it's not my family wasn't there, my ancestors weren't there, but maybe my soul was, or maybe I was healing somebody else's soul. I don't want to too much get into thinking about what it was. It just was what it was.
Yeah. I mean, the Theosophist Blavatsky with the Akashic record just says that there's all this, like, the cosmos is like a memory bank,
Yes,
and so you can then travel, and even Rupert Sheldrake talks about the morphogenetic field.
yes,
So I think that with some tools we can travel in this cosmic matrix, right? It's still very mysterious, but for sure
yes,
we are not this independent, separate being. Like I always say that I think my listener will get bored to hear that. But 2 years ago, in 2022, the Nobel Prize in physics was given to this Swedish scientists. They proved entanglement. They proved that these subatomic particles that were connected were then separated thousands of miles, and they were still entangled.
hmm,
So that proved delocalization. So on a subatomic level, this idea of space is that we have is not correct.
yes.
So yeah.
I want to add one thing to this story is part of the realization I had, which is why I continued working with ayahuasca, was that in I'm not saying this from an egocentric, like I'm something special, but I think every person has this capability and capacity. But in the releasing of the anger and judgment and fear that was inside of me during that experience so many years ago, it also in some way created an opening for others also to heal that had maybe been there. And I met several people in my life who were actually there. And
In Auschwitz.
yes, as my
Oh
patients,
wow. Oh wow.
it was very dramatic, very emotional to meet them.
Wow. They were like 85 or something.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they were children when they were there, but they still remembered. They still had the tattoo
Wow. Wow. And so where are we now? How old were you?
right now.
More or less. No, when we were there, when you were in Poland and you went to Auschwitz.
Yeah, that was 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Ah, okay, it was recently.
Recently, yes.
Ah, I see, I see, I see. Okay, so you decided to you did the acupuncture after your first trip, then immediately after having this incredible experience with ayahuasca, you decided to you know dedicate your life to offering this medicine to the people. And what kind of training did you go? It was
Yeah. I still, I didn't do it. I did several more experiences with the ayahuasca and some with other plant medicines, but I was an acupuncturist. And so I practiced acupuncture for many years. And I think in the practicing of acupuncture, I learned about the human body in school and in working on people. I learned about spirit in school and working on people. I learned about the energetic body and how to manipulate the energy for the person's benefit. And I learned how to listen and ask questions and be present and see things. Like my favorite see thing, patient walked into my office one day, sat down at my desk. I looked at her and it's like, "You're pregnant."
you felt it.
I could see it, and I don't know how. And she broke down crying because it wasn't something that she could keep. And
Mhm.
but it was dramatic to me. Like I'm tuning into things that I can't necessarily and don't necessarily want to explain. I'm
Yeah,
not the kind of person who wants to explain everything. I want to feel it. I want to be it. I want to do it. I don't want to necessarily pick it apart because I think in picking it apart, some of the magic is lost.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But so just for the audience that are not familiar, what are the basic principle of acupuncture?
Oh, yeah. Acupuncture basically goes back to the Neolithic, to the New Stone Age, when people could accurately carve stones, like all of the beautiful arrowheads you might see, or hammers, or whatever. Those are all Neolithic. Neo means new, lithic means stone, as opposed to Paleolithic, which means Old Stone Age. Which Old Stone Age, I might pick up a rock and I'd use the rock. New Stone Age, I would manipulate the rock into the shape that I wanted it to be very accurately and very beautifully. It's really quite a skill. So they found in tombs, ancient tombs in China, these needles made out of stone. And they were the first acupuncture needles. They didn't necessarily puncture the skin because you wouldn't want to put a stone in your skin, but they were used for intense pinpoint pressure on certain specific points. So an easy way to understand the very, 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 very basics of acupuncture is, what do you do if you have a headache? You rub your head.
Mm,
You're actually pushing on acupuncture points. So, and you can find exactly the specific point where the headache is coming from. Or
mm,
the same thing, maybe in the back of the neck or shoulder or your stomach hurts. So you put your hands on your stomach. All of these things are the beginning, utter, very, very beginning of the science and art of acupuncture. And then you take the ancient Chinese, especially penchant for recording things. And, if I take one of those stone needles and push it on that point, it'll do whatever it does. And, my stomach feels better. I'm doing it there. The patient's stomach feels better. And then my feeling is probably at one point somebody made one of these stone needles a little bit too sharp and it penetrated the skin. And voila, acupuncture is born because the effect was probably better. That's totally my fantasy. That's not anything that there's a reality about. That's my fantasy. And so acupuncture is the art of, how do you say it in a couple sentences? Bringing a person's body, mind, and spirit into harmony with their environment and removing from them pathogenic or disease causing energies or matter. So the whole body is interconnected. Like Western medicine, go to a doctor, the doctor will be a generalist, usually the first time, a family practitioner or a general practitioner or whatever. And they'll say, oh, yes, you need to go see a kidney doctor or a lung doctor or a bone doctor, a nephrologist, orthopedic doctor, whatever it is. And then those are people that have just studied this one organ or one system extensively. And they may not know very much or may have forgotten about the rest of the body, but they know more about this one thing than anybody else does, other than people in that field. So the art of specialization is what Western medicine, Western science is about. It's, the reductive thing of taking things down to the basic components. Like if I have a liver problem, what are the enzymes that are out of balance? What are causing the enzymes that are out of balance? What's doing that? And it goes down to the basic components. It's really amazing science. Acupuncture looks at the person and says, well, you're not a liver, you're not a bone, you're not a kidney, you're everything. And everything in you is working in relationship with everything else. So nothing gets sick by itself. Nothing goes out of balance by itself. And so it's using the needles on specific points to try to redirect how the energy flows in the body. And also, of course, using herbs and massage and other techniques. But with acupuncture, it's using the needles almost like, the good analogy of this is old school trains. You had a train going down a track, and then there was a junction, and somebody had to actually pull the lever to decide which way the train went. So the body has hundreds and hundreds of these junction points that putting the needle in it, you can change how the energy moves in the body.
I see.
It's fascinating stuff.
So
Yeah.
it's a very holistic approach rather than
It was
reductionist.
the original holistic medicine. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think.
But so when you said mind, body, and spirit, I can see the energetic interpretation. But how does the spirit fits into these meridians?
It's all one.
Mhm.
Energy is spirit. Energy is breath. Breath is
Yes.
spirit. Breath
Yes.
breath means spirit. Respiration means, uh, I guess, working the spirit. I don't know exactly, but respirar, to
Yes.
breathe,
Yes.
is
Yes.
spirit.
And did you in some way brought your experience with the needle into the plant medicine practice?
Indirectly, yeah, yeah. I definitely brought the acupuncture ideologies into my plant medicine work. Yeah, specifically if somebody needed something in a ceremony, I could go and do some acupuncture on them or hold a point on them. And the points would
Yeah.
release the energy that was stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so, which, if you don't mind me asking, which lineage did you adopt? There is ayahuasca. There is like, someone told me, it's like pasta. You can cook it in so many different ways. There is so many countries that have Amazons. There are so many tribes. There is a practice which is more celebratory, a practice which is more for healing. One is more energetic. The Peruvian, it's more on the dark. The Brazilian is more celebratory. How did you choose your path?
When I cook, I may use tortillas, miso, pasta, you know, plants from, Italian plants and Japanese plants. I put them all in the same dish. And if you're a good
Yes.
cook, you can make it taste good. So,
Yes. You made your own recipe.
and I don't recommend this, okay? I don't recommend the way that I did it. But I started when I went to the Amazon the first time, my eyes were twice as big as my face. I was like, whoa, where am I? What is this? And I started going to different shamans, curanderos. We call them, they're not shaman. They weren't called shamans then, but curanderos or healers. And I went to initially a person who was, they call them mestizos. They're part Spanish, part indigenous, and they have their own kind of more Catholicized way of doing things and very beautiful. And I went to that and was like, oh, I can learn from this. And then I went to Shipibo, and Shipibo, like for most people, it knocked my socks off. And I really wanted to learn that and was ready to take on a teacher as my plant medicine guru, and that didn't work out. And I kept on, for the first year, I kept on going to different people and just paying attention. And I never really wanted to say, "You are my maestro, I'm your apprentice." It never happened. I think I was too old for that in a way.
Mhm.
Also, I knew a lot more about a lot of things than they did, after having years of acupuncture practice behind me. So, but I learned, I listened, I watched, I asked questions. And I've always liked asking questions of people because my favorite thing in school was to ask questions of one of my professors or teachers until they couldn't answer anymore and go, "We don't know." And then I realized, when I got to that "we don't know," I was at a really beautiful jumping off place into the unknown there. And the same thing with the shamans I work with in Peru. I started, and again, I do not recommend this. Please don't do this. Um,
Mm.
when I started acupuncture school, about 2 weeks into it, some friends of mine and myself went down to Chinatown and bought some acupuncture needles. Started, doing acupuncture on each other, just following the recipes in the book. Don't do that, please. Lucky nobody
Mhm.
died. And the same thing happened to me with acupuncture. Is I went down the first year. I went down. I came back up here, and some friends of mine said, "Oh, you got to give us a ceremony." And I was like, I can't. Don't be ridiculous. I don't know anything. And they said, "No, we trust you. Go ahead." And back and forth a little bit, and finally poured them a couple cups of some medicine I brought up from South America with me, and they didn't die, and they didn't go crazy, and they actually loved every moment of it. So
Yeah.
I just started doing more and more of that kind of organically. I didn't really look for it, but I started doing more and more of that. And I went down to Peru usually once or twice a year, just to be with different people I was working with down there, and develop my own way of doing things, kind of
Yeah.
based on the Peruvian style. I really like the Peruvian style and the Upper Amazonian style. My first experience was in Ecuador. That was really something. And I really love that, in the dark, introspective. You're not singing along too much, and you're doing the work on yourself, and the shaman's doing the work with the song, with the music. And I've very much responded to the music, very much responded to the Icaros, and very much also learned kind of organically to play different instruments while I was both in ceremony and out of ceremony. The
What do you think is the effect and purpose of the Icaros of the music?
What do I think? Um, this is a good question. On one hand, there's, like if you ask me a question, I'll give you three separate contradictory answers quite often. So I might do that now. I think the first part, one level is, and nobody quote any one of these because they all go together. The first level is it's entertainment. It's cosmic entertainment. The shaman's up there singing patterns and light and colors and energetic magic, so that the medicine can work on your body without you trying to make it stop. You get entranced by it. And that entrancement is it's beautiful. It's lovely. A good singer, a good musician is really a magician. It's the real magic. And so that's part of it is it takes your mind and lets the medicine work in your body while the medicine is in your body. On another level, it is manipulating the energy. First off in the room, and second off if you're getting a song sung to you in you. For example, here's an interesting thing that happened to me is long story, I ended up in the jungle in a ceremony with bronchitis, bad bronchitis, about at least 2 or 3 hours from the nearest hospital. And I was in the medicine. I was with a group. I took a group down there. And I'm like, oh my God, this is intense. What if I need to get to the hospital? I will die. Good hour and a half walk to get to the road, and then another hour and a half to get to the hospital. If something goes serious here, I knew enough about my body and about physiology that I knew that I was going into a bad place. And I'm coughing and hacking, and the shaman calls me up and sings 2 songs. I go back, I sit down at my place, take a couple deep breaths and relax. And about 10 minutes later, wait a second, I'm taking deep breaths and relaxing. What just happened? So the next day I asked him what he did, and he's saying, oh, I just sing a couple songs to your lungs. And it healed him. That particular disease was gone. So that's the effect of the Icaros. They take you on a journey, for one. And the second thing is, at the higher level, is the shaman is using the Icaros to, like acupuncture almost, manipulate the energy in your body in a totally different way.
Yeah, they call it like energetic surgery.
Energetic surgery. And, sometimes they will call in, they call them the spirit doctors or the doctors of the higher dimensions. And those doctors will do surgery. There's that amazing story. It's in Howard Charing's book, Ayahuasca Visions, about Pablo Amaringo, who was the great beginner. He was the first ayahuasca artist, really. And he started the school that has taught so many other of the great ayahuasca painters that are now coming out of the Amazon. So he had a heart valve problem since he was a baby. He was born with it. And it affected his life. And I hope I'm getting this story right. So it affected his life a lot in a very bad way. But he was interested in ayahuasca. And so he was doing ayahuasca one night, lying in a hammock by the river, by the Amazon, by the Ucayali, because he was from Pucallpa. So he was lying in a hammock by the river, and this huge white steamboat, like the old Mississippi steamboat, comes tooling down the river, stops right where he's in his hammock. Plank comes down, and a doctor, an American doctor, an American nurse was dressed up in a nurse's uniform. The doctor was wearing a suit, and they walk up to him, and he's like completely in the medicine, unable to move. They cut him open, take his heart down to the river, wash it out, sew it up, come back, put it in his chest, sew him up, and then leave. Okay, so it's a really wild vision, right? The next day, his heart valve problem was gone and never came back.
Wow, wow.
I don't know how that can be explained. You can't say spirit doctor and have it make any sense. You can't say body, mind, medicine and have it make any sense. All I can really say is ayahuasca. That there is this other universe or universes that ayahuasca opens a person up to, where things that we in our, very rational, very material world are not able to comprehend, are not able to imagine even, or maybe imagine it as a weird movie. But that somebody could be, drink a medicine, lie down in the steamboat, comes and doctor and nurse get off and fix his heart. Yeah, that was a dream, but his heart was better. You know,
Yeah, yeah. Are you familiar with this term, the default mode network?
yes, roughly.
The the neuropsychopharmacologists with this functioning MRI,
Yeah,
they found out that the DMT, psilocybin, LSD, mescaline, all the tryptamines, they reduce the blood supply in these three key area of the brain: the prefrontal cortex, the medium cortex, and the thalamus, or something like that. And so by reducing the blood supply, this default mode network get weakened and subdued. And Michael Pollan in his book called the default mode network the closest thing to the egoic armor. So we now know from somatic medicine, the body keeps the score, and we now know that what's happening in the brain, especially in terms of trauma, can then be a result of body complication, right? They are connected. So, the closest scientific explanation I could give to this, miracle of the heart valve is that, this medicine, by changing the neurochemistry of your brain, allow, like sort of like melt the egoic armor around the neurocircuitry that were then causing this body ailment, like Paul Stamets, the
Mhm.
mycologist. He was stuttering, and he took a big dose of mushroom during a storm. He went up on a tree. The storm was getting worse, so it was trippy. He couldn't come down, and only in the morning came down from the tree, and his stuttering was gone. But there is so many examples like that, right?
Yeah, and on the other hand, that's our, rational mind trying to
Interpret,
apprehend
yeah,
the irrational.
yeah,
And I so often, how does ayahuasca do this? And I'll just say it's magic. And
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah. Uh,
completely comfortable with that as an answer.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Completely
Yeah,
comfortable with
so
that.
some people are more cognitive driven
Yeah.
or oriented. Some people needs to get it more in the brain. But I understand. I hear you. There's no need.
I think the problem is, I mean, to me, it's like we need to walk hand in hand, science and spirit, science and the art of ayahuasca. These things
Yeah,
need to walk hand in hand. But so many scientists want to rationalize the irrational, want to explain the unexplicable,
yeah,
and they want to put in a box those things that offend their reason.
yeah, yeah,
Because it's
yeah, yeah.
offensive to the reason that a big white steamship comes down the river and does heart surgery and, on somebody. That's offensive to the reason. Of course, it's the default mode network and blah,
Blah
blah,
blah blah.
blah, And on the other side, that's definitely part of what was going on.
Yeah,
As above, so below, Hermes Trismegistus said, what's happening here is also happening here in the body.
yeah,
And on the other hand, there's magic.
yeah.
Hermes Trismegistus was, you know,
But so, do your clients get satisfied when you say it's magic? Because sometimes I feel that especially now, this medicine is attracting a lot of people that might not be necessarily like believer, that have a very secular materialistic ontology, right?
yeah,
And so when they go and they try plant medicine, and they travel to different dimension, and they have this, maybe they see these entities, and then everybody now is talking about integration. They're doing integration classes, integration school, integrations retreat. And but then, for someone who has such a different ontology, how do you integrate like the Mississippi boat, or an angel, or a gremlins, or an entity that comes? It's like you take the caveman, you bring them to Manhattan for one day, and then how do you integrate that? So how do you? I mean, even recently, the brother of a friend of mine had a terrified, younger, maybe 19 years old, had a terrifying trip. He felt falling in the void and dying. He saw the dog with three heads, and he had a psychotic crisis. He had a psychotic meltdown. He was not ready to that.
yeah,
And then in the weeks after, I tried my best to find some therapies that would, in a way, create some sort of ontology. Because for some of these, especially white men, they're not gonna buy it's just magic.
yeah,
How do you deal with that? How do you prepare them that they're gonna travel to a different dimension, maybe?
yeah. That's the effect of the medicine,
Yeah,
and I do fully believe that of what there is to know in creation, we know the tiniest part of the tiniest part. And no matter, no, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, well, it's so modern now. We have AI. We have totally the entire world is covered by information and communication. This has never happened before that we know of anyway. I don't think it's ever happened before. Like I love Romania, and I was up in the mountains of Romania at a friend's house, and this old shepherd comes by with a herd of sheep, and he's walking, stops under a tree with his herd of sheep, and he has his head bowed down, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really beautiful. He's there praying and, really connecting to nature and his sheep, and he had an iPhone in front of him. That's never happened before. So, and he was not a rich shepherd. He was just a poor shepherd living in a little hut in the mountains. I was thinking, we're so modern right now. But then I thought, in the 1940s, people thought they were so modern too.
Yeah.
That's like the thing. So what's it going to be like in 100 or 1,000 years if we survive that? They'll be in places using technology, using whatever that we can't even imagine. We don't have the capacity to imagine. Nobody of maybe Jules Verne, but nobody of 150 or 200 years ago could imagine anything like what we're experiencing now.
Yeah.
Technology taken to its limit is magic, indistinguishable from magic. I just mangled that quote, but the idea that what we experience today would be looked at as being magic to somebody from the past, not too distant past. I mean, even AI is like 2001, I think was the first really experience people had of AI going nuts. And
Yeah.
so what we're experiencing today in this medicine world, what I call magic, I like the word magic. I really am comfortable with not being able to understand what's going on. Unlike a lot of people, I don't mind at all. Um, I don't care how my camera works. I care what the picture it takes is.
Yeah. And so your client are happy with this interpretation of just, surrender and trust to the magic of the universe.
I don't even talk about that really. I we're getting into it because we're talking about this, but usually the aim that I have with people when I'm working with them is, that we have our intellectual mind and we have our soul, our heart, our being, who the I is when I say
Energy. Yeah.
I or me.
Yeah.
Who is it? We point here, Japanese people point here, Chinese people point there,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
who is that
Yeah.
I? And if we look back through history, there's books called scriptures, there's mystical poets, there's incredible amount of people who are pointing to this thing inside of us, to this experience within that is beyond time and space, that is outside of time and space, that exists in the exact moment of now, that is not intellectual. It's not understandable by the mind. Rumi said, the mind cannot see it, only the heart. I think Rumi said that.
Yeah. It's pure
Pure
consciousness.
consciousness. So in ceremony, I want people to experience that. I want people to go there if they can, as much as they're able. And it's an infinite journey, so there is no I've done as much as I can. No matter how much you experience, you're just still scratching the surface of infinity. You're still scratching the surface. So if that then is the goal, that doesn't have to be explained rationally. It just is. And when you experience it, you recognize that it's bigger than the rational mind, it's bigger than the intellect. So the result of that, of allowing yourself to merge into that, is almost like resetting a confused computer. Turn it off, comes back on, it works better. And that's how I explain things. That's how I integrate things. I'm not really concerned in my work. I'm not concerned very much about gremlins and machine elves and gods and goddesses, because I look at it as being, there's a path, metaphorical, but there's a path. We can see about this much of it, but we still take the next step. We can't see the future. we can't even really see the past. We just see our memories of the past. But there's this golden, Camino del Oro, the road of gold, the
Mm.
Camino de los Santos, the road of the saints, that is inside, is the breath, is taking us on this journey. And we can pay attention to that. And there's so much other stuff that are side trips off of that road. Like Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, for example. He had exhausted his ability and the ability of the technologies of his time to understand who he was, to understand what, the purpose of his life was. And he sat down under the Bodhi tree. The milkmaiden came and gave him some rice and milk because he hadn't eaten in so long. Use your imagination a little bit there. But she gave him some rice and milk, and he sat and he didn't move. And in his not moving, he was attacked by armies of demons. He was tempted by all the wealth of the world. He could have been a great king. He was tempted by dancing gods and goddesses, all the things that can happen in a psychedelic journey. These things like, okay, so here's a demon. Do I fight it or do I sit and not interact? If I sit and not interact, there's no energy going to this thought form of the demon, and it dissolves into the nothingness that it really is. The same thing for gods and goddesses. I can get all caught up in, I saw Krishna, I saw Buddha, I saw this, I saw that. But if I just sit, they dissolve into the non reality that they are because they are just thought forms. And the more I do that, the deeper I go into the core of my being, the clearer I get, the more connected to reality I am, and the default mode network gets activated and all the things in my body heal. you know? So it's a different way of looking at it. That does not need a lot of explanation. I don't want to have to analyze people's visions. In other words, yeah,
Yes, understand. But so the desired outcome, it's healing.
yeah, it's peace, connection.
But so how do you do the follow up of your session? Are you in touch with your clients? Do you speak with them? How often? When do you recommend them to come back? How is the aftercare, if you don't mind me asking?
I tend to be fairly hands off
Mm-hmm.
with giving people directions on what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We do have after every night ceremony, we have a long circle council, I call it, in the morning. I've been doing that since I started doing the work. Nobody else was doing it back then. But
Mm-hmm.
it's based on kind of the Shona and Ndebele council idea, talking stick, is added into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that until people are clear, people are talked out.
Yeah.
If somebody has stuff from their past come up, we talk about it
Yeah.
and talk about how to move through it. And then usually a week and a half later, we meet online for another council. And
Mm-hmm.
then they're always available to contact me if they need to.
Mm-hmm.
But I find, once people are clear, they tend to stay clear. And if people leave confused, they'll tend to stay confused. So, and it's usually for me, it's not very difficult to unconfuse somebody.
Wow.
Uh, my favorite story was somebody called me up and, it was like 6 months had gone by. And she said, I have to talk to you. I'm really frightened about what I experienced. And I said, oh, it's okay to be frightened. She said, really? Wow. Thank you. I'll talk to you later. She had to have permission to feel what she was feeling. That was what it took. And, granted, there'll be more complicated things going on. And the advantage of living in Los Angeles is every other person is an integration therapist these days. I'm exaggerating, but
Yeah,
so
yeah.
many
But
different.
so you recommend
Yes,
some
yeah,
eventually. Yeah.
yeah. We have
I
we
think
have
it's important.
in our circle we have somebody who does Peter Levine's work, somatic experiencing, and we have
Nice.
massage person. We have a lot of different, not a lot, but several different pathways for people to find healing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because my experience with, especially with trauma, is that it is possible to integrate the this the neurocircuitry of trauma is possible to rewire it. Neuroplasticity do exist, but it takes time and work.
Yes,
And so, like Gabor Mate, for example, has this somatic approach where you visualize this energetic, this traumatic energy in your body, and you stay with it, and you feel it, and you become curious about it, and then you integrate it. But it's almost everyday
yeah,
practice. And I remember my personal experience with ayahuasca is that you have a 1 week, maybe 2 weeks of clarity, but then the confusion come back. So I think personally, I don't know what's your view, but now that MDMA has become legal, if not this year, next year. Psilocybin has been already decriminalized in Oregon. I mean, soon DMT will, in the future. I mean, there's can always be backlash, but I think that once this medicine will be legal, I think that there will be integrated with somatic therapies, with transpersonal therapies, so that it can be one of the tool. I personally, I think when people talk about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, I personally think that the important part is the therapy, not the
mhm.
psychedelic. And but so d- you recommend some integration therapies, but you don't have therapists that call you, psychotherapists that says, listen, my client is, I think, is ready for a session, and that happens to you also.
Yes,
Exactly, I think that's the right model.
yeah, and like I said, I mean, I learned this path in a very traditional Upper Amazonian way.
Yeah,
And if you tell the shaman, "Are we going to have an integration council or circle?" You go, "What?"
but those shaman, Richard, those shaman, they were never really, I mean, this is a little bit like of an invention of the West to drink ayahuasca. I mean, those shaman were not even giving the ayahuasca to their participant, right?
This is one theory. I don't believe this.
No. But the reason why these shamans 1,000 years ago were drinking were not to cure the trauma of the Western man. It was like maybe to fight with the local tribes, or to attract the weather, the rain, to visualize the food, to protect from the jaguar. So I when you say, yeah, the upper Amazonian shaman doesn't talk about integration, but because it's not really used to deal with the Western psyche,
Yeah,
don't you think?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and also I wanted just to add that we have absolutely no idea what the practices were in the jungle or what the jungle was prior to um,
Our discovery.
Spanish invasion. Really, we
Yeah,
have no
yeah,
idea. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
there are discoveries happening in the Amazon showing that basically this is in 1491. The book, amazing book. Everybody should read it. 1491 and 1493, I think. Amazing books. That there was a civilization there. The entire Amazon was cultivated.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was all on purpose. And we look at it and it's like this massive wild jungle, but they had millions of people who lived there, who built cities, who lived in harmony. And even the tribal people lived in harmony with it and nurtured it. It was their home, it was
yeah,
their pharmacy. So we don't know. We have no idea what
yeah,
a lot of the ideas about, well, the shamans didn't drink the medicine, and I mean the shamans drank and the people didn't, that came out of Western minds sitting around the table talking and making stuff up because of their own insecurities, their own fears. I don't think I never heard that until recently. I
yeah,
never heard that
yeah, 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 yeah,
that it's too much of a tradition, too much of a understanding and beauty there to think that this is a recent invention.
yeah,
It's deep. It's so
yeah.
deep. so
so deep.
deep.
It's beautiful.
And
It's becoming so popular
yeah,
now. I mean, my wife, she was, she started to drink like in the end of the 90s, and recently she was commenting that back then there were only people that didn't have any other
yeah,
option. Was either suicide or ayahuasca. I mean, I'm
yeah,
exaggerating a little bit, but it was like really people that were at the end of the line that really needed help. Now it's like talk a cocktail party. Have you tried? Have you not tried? I want to try it.
yeah.
What do you think about that? What do you think about this overexcitement for also people that don't have any specific issue to address? Are they welcome to this practice, or they should maybe wait to know more? Do you have a screening process when
I
some of your
do.
clients?
I
Yeah,
do.
what is the criteria, if you don't mind me
I
asking?
had to back up a half a step there in that it has gotten extremely popular right now. There are people doing it who should not be doing it. There are people leading
Yeah.
ceremonies who have not done their own work and are in it for whatever ego or money. I don't know. Um, it's dangerous what's happening now. It's a testimony to the safety of the medicine that a lot more people aren't really getting in trouble with it. To me,
Uh-huh.
it's like this is so safe. Um, Plus, you're getting these weird ideas of like heroic retreats where you have ayahuasca, you have San Pedro, you have bufo, you have sapo, you have verape, you have DMT, and you have 5-MeO DMT, and you do a sweat lodge, and people die in these things. And because it's a marketing ploy. If a person really knows ayahuasca, they don't so much need to go to a bunch of other things. They don't so much need it. And same thing with San Pedro. If a person really knows San Pedro, they don't need to go to a bunch of other things. Um, and that said, I think like ayahuasca and San Pedro and some of the other Amazonian plants are synergistic and do work together. But the idea of taking a 3-day or 4-day retreat and doing 10 different substances is insane. And I think that's only going to get worse for a while because it's not part of our culture. We don't really have any depth of understanding of how these plants work. And the idea that somebody 18 years old can go into a store and pick up 10 grams of mushrooms and eat them, it'll probably be okay, but that's a big probably. And I just don't want to see any backlash happen with people who don't know what they're doing getting it over their heads.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think the model now is that therapies will be licensed,
mhm.
and those license will be able to give it to the patient. So only licensed people can buy it.
And you can go in, there's stores in Canada you can walk in and buy mushrooms now.
Already
Already
now?
now, yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah.
And and so how do you see your practice, your future? Do you ever think, how do you see yourself doing this facilitation for the next foreseeable future? Where do you see yourself in 10, 15, 20 years?
Dead.
No, you look such, I think,
No.
I think you seem such in good shape.
Yeah. Yeah. No, in 10 or 15 years, well, I joke about it, but there's a certain song that I wrote that I sing in every ceremony that's like, it's so good. It's so good. It's really like, and I'm the only person that can really sing it right now. My assistants are learning it, but I sing it and I say, I want to be in the middle of this song and die when I'm singing this song. It'll freak you all out, but that's okay. You'll get
Yeah,
over it. So I want to continue doing this as long as I am able to, capable of physically. And I'm also, I'm also just finishing up writing a book now, and maybe two
nice.
books. It's one book that's turning into two books, and I don't know. I mean, I love to travel as well, and I have in the past had communities in different parts of the world. And I'm hoping that all kind of fell apart during the COVID years,
Mm.
but I'm hoping to reestablish that and take this joy and love to the rest of the world.
Amazing.
My dreams. I have a dream. I have a dream, and I was invited to. Well, I'll back up because it's very relevant right now. It's super relevant, and I had a ceremony a number of years ago that had a handful of Israelis in it, and we also had one Arab in the ceremony. So the Israelis were singing, they wanted to sing their songs and they sang a beautiful prayer. And then, I'm like, sometimes I grow horns. Sometimes I grow horns. And I told the Arab man to sing the call to prayer that they sing 5 times a day in the Muslim countries. And he sang it.
Mm.
And I was watching carefully what's going on there. The Israelis were like, where's our weapons? We have an enemy in here. This is the song of the enemy. And then it didn't take very long, but then they just went, oh, it's so beautiful.
Mm.
It's so beautiful. So my dream would be to do ceremonies where there's Arabs and there's Israelis, where there's Muslims and there's Jews and there's Christians and there's people who come from these diverse ridiculously battling cultures, the stupidity that is unbounded right now, and have them sing to each other with the medicine. And, when they went into the room, into the ceremony, and they were enemies. When they left, they were brothers and sisters.
Amazing.
And I have been privileged to do some ceremonies in the Mideast, and the effect of it is so beautiful. The possibilities are so beautiful for this actually helping to discover that, God, Hashem, Allah, different names for the same thing,
Yeah, for sure.
different names for the same thing. And there's no need to fight. We can sing to each other. We can celebrate the beauty with each other. And I spent a lot of time in Turkey, and you know, I'm Jewish. My background is Jewish. I don't have much of a Jewish background, but I'm there. And to be, leading ceremonies with a room full of Muslims, basically, handful of Jews, handful of Christians, but mostly Muslims, and to come to a point where there's so much love.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you call yourself. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter what your history is. It doesn't matter what the background is. There's just love.
Yeah.
And what if we're in a situation now, you know, I look at the situation in the world and there's no hope. There's like literally no hope. There's no great leaders. There's nothing happening. What if the only solution to all of this is we learn to love each other unconditionally, uncategorically? Not because we're going to get all gushy and, squishy, wishy about it, but because we're going to discover that the core of my existence, the core of your existence, the core of every person that's listening to this existence is love, is pure love, is love is God. Jesus wasn't joking when he said God is love. He didn't say God is like love, God is similar to love, or God is sort of like, maybe if you think about it, it's like love. He said God is love, period. And the love, of course, the idea of the love in this situation is that there's more to love than squishy stuff that we humans know as being love. It's the love of the creation of the universe. It's the love that exists at the farthest dimensional reality, or the farthest alternative universe, or, down into the basic subatomic nature of every atom in your body. That's what I'm talking about. And that's why I don't care about goblins and, you know, fairies and stuff that happen in ceremony. This is what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
This is what I want, is like, what if? what if there's an experience a human being can have that can transform them so deeply that they have that experience of there's so much more than the shell that we live in.
Yeah, connection with other, connection with nature,
Yeah,
with the cosmos,
yeah,
this idea of belonging. There is a lot of story of community, problematic community, conflictual community, where ayahuasca session were introduced and it was completely transformed.
yes,
Even us here in Ibiza, even recently, people were, there's been disagreement, there's been business disagreement, but then when you are, in those circumstances, in those environments, you know the the similarities prevails over the difference, for sure.
yes.
Richard, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Do you have a place to send the audience to, maybe because one of your book is out
Not
or
yet,
not?
not yet. Soon.
Not yet.
Heartfeather.com. Yeah,
Heartfeather.com. We'll put it.
Heartfeather.
We'll
Yeah,
put
I
it in
took
the
on the
show
name
notes.
Heartfeather, of course, because it's the idea of when a person dies, their heart is taken out and put on a scale. And on the other side of the scale is a feather. And if the heart weighs more than the feather, they can't go on to paradise.
Oh
So
wow,
if the heart weighs less than the feather, then their paradise is open to them the next lifetime. It's Egyptian,
beautiful.
and it's the scale of Ma'at.
Oh, nice, nice.
And so my idea is when I had that 3 o'clock in the morning, like heart feather, heartfeather.com, it's there, was that I wanted that to be the goal, is to have people find a way, or find how to, or take the creative steps into making their heart lighter than a feather instead of heavier than lead. So
Nice.
yeah,
Very good. Thank you,
thank you
Richard.
so
Thank you
much.
very much for your time, and thank you for your work, and thank you for your spirit and your generosity. And it really come through your integrity and true desire to help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Koka sunarai sunarayanti. 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 Koka sunarai sunarayanti.